Hello, everybody. So welcome you at our today's Startup Leaders Club, online panel discussion by inspirational leaders of innovation and drivers of change. And our panel discussion today is devoted to business model pivot in the era of pandemic series 4, disrupting industries, creating new business models, and finding new opportunities in crisis. And our today's speakers include Amos Schwarzfahrt, Managing Director of Techstars, Dan Nadab, CEO of EnviroPower, Joran de Wachter, Chief Opportunity Officer Seeds.io, Dr. Leon Eisen, CEO of Acceton Medical, and Doland White, founder of Doland White Consulting, and Giampaolo Parigi, my co-moderator for today, also venture capitalist, chairman, single family office. And myself, Nadia Nesterova, I'm IR advisor, independent director of the National Alternative Investment Management Association, and an advisor to a number of VC firms, private equity, and hedge funds. So, we start the first round of introductions of our speakers today. Dolan, could you please introduce yourself with a brief background of you and the company?
Sure, thank you, Nadia. So my name is Dolan White. I'm in Los Angeles, California, and live about a mile from the Pacific Ocean, which is still closed, by the way, so we can't go there. And I come from 32 years in the software industry, leading large global teams, participating in M&A activities, and primarily with services delivery for companies like ServiceNow and Symantec and other kinds of organizations. Left that and was spent 5 years as CEO of a digital marketing firm, and in November, founded my own consulting company, and just in time to be out talking to businesses about COVID and Corona, and working with clients on now the other side of it, which is recovery and what to do now that we're coming out of it. So thanks for having me here. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Dolan. And Leon? Could you please turn on your mic?
Sorry about it. My name is Leon Eisen. I am PhD in physics, and I started like a scientist, and then left it and went to the industry, and specifically medical device industry. So spent a lot of time and money and professional time to develop medical devices. Went from just engineer to CTO of the company, and then I decided to become entrepreneur. I had very good invention during my professional time, and I decided to implement this invention. It's a world first wrist sensor pulse oximetry monitor. And why world first? Because world first we received FDA clearance for this product. And we spent 10 years on development and get to the market. And it's not only this, because this product created totally new type of remote patient monitoring. We call it remote continuous care, that applied for high-risk patients, specifically for high-risk patients, because before Acceton came to the market, it was independent whether high-risk patients, low-risk patients. It was exactly the same equipment that people use for home measure, episodic measure like fingertip pulse oximeters or something like this. So we created new type of remote patient monitoring. It's also our invention, and currently we continuously screen and monitor severe chronic disease patients. It could flag critical medical issues. It could enable immediate follow-up medical intervention. And there are some companies which join our new type of remote patient care and found their niche in this area.
Thank you so much, Leon. And Amos?
Hey, thanks for having me. So I'm Amos Schwarzfarb. I'm the managing director of Techstars in Austin. I also am the author of Somewhere Faster. The first 20 years of my career were helping to start, build, and even found a couple of startups, actually 5 over the course of the first 20 years. And the thing that I think is relevant is that 3 of them were actually started and exited through the different other economic challenges we've had over the course of the last 20 years. So one right through the popping of the bubble, which exited for about 450 million. Another one that started and grew through post 9/11, which exited for 350 million, and then another that we started and exited after the housing market crisis, and that one exited for 50 million all through it. So I've seen a lot. And then now for the last 5 years, I've been an investor through Techstars, running the accelerator here in Austin. So I've seen a lot of how to build businesses through these really hard times. And so I think that's the experience that I bring today.
Thank you so much, Amos. And Joran?
Hi, my name is Joran de Wachter. I'm in Brussels, and I work with Seeds.io, which is a technology scale-up in the event sector, a sector that has been particularly badly hit by COVID-19. I've been doing this for a couple of years. Before that, I was advising startups, mainly around business models and use of intellectual property. Seeds.io allows people to make floor plans when they sell tickets. Thank you. And I see Nadia's screen is frozen, so I presume she has.
Looks like we might have lost Nadia.
Yeah. Maybe Dan, you want to jump in for me and just.
Yeah,
Yes.
that sounds like I'm next on the list. Do you hear me well?
Yes.
Oh, very nice. So my name is Diana Dab. I'm the CEO of Power. I've been in the energy business and more specifically in the distributed generation part of this large word that calls energy, from geothermal to heat recovery to wind to concentrated solar. And in the last 7-8 years, I'm dedicated my career to this fascinating field called micro combined heat and power. What it is, I can sum for you in one sentence, which basically summarizes what EnviroPower is about. And the sentence goes like that. If we are successful, we are still a startup, your next heating system will generate electricity and provide backup power to your homes and businesses. And I'm sure we will talk more about the backup power element, in those cases where most of us working from home and losing electricity means more than just losing the lights.
Thank you so much, Dan. And Giampaolo?
Yes, good morning and good day, everyone. My name is Giampaolo Parigi, and some of you know me already. So hello, everyone, those who know me and those who don't yet. I'm a venture capitalist, the chairman of a single family office, and I have a keen interest in technology startups. I've been 30 years in the venture capitalist space, investment space, private equity around the world, also on emerging markets. And I look forward to hearing your very qualified opinions today on this panel. So back to you, Nadia.
Thank you. What would you say, Dolan?
Sorry, what will I say about our current situation?
Yes, the current situation, maybe opportunities, and the comment of Giampaolo. If you could share your experience with that.
Sure. I think it's a very interesting time. It was very interesting kind of prior to the call start today to listen to some of the comments that Leon was making. And you're down here in this corner of my screen, so I look at you down over here. But it's I think one of the challenges that we're facing in the companies that I consult to and the other businesses that I'm working with is we're seeing, we're obviously seeing a lot of different kinds of stages of I'll call them kind of winners and losers through this Corona crisis, right? There are clearly things that businesses can do to recover from this. The biggest thing I'm talking to companies about are really kind of two categories, and that is the kind of the social impact as people come back to work, and what that means for the folks in your organization, and the fact that you can indeed be productive outside of the brick and mortar. So it shifts the way we lead from a command and control to more of a trust-based focused. And then businesses that are coming back have got to kind of step away a little bit from the old-fashioned 1, 3, 5-year planning and do kind of smaller, more agile, incremental sets of planning as they're kind of moving forward into this what someday will be the new normal. I get a little aggravated when I hear the fact that we have a new normal, because we're not anywhere near what normal is going to be yet, at least in my opinion. So I think it's a very, very interesting time for business. I think that there are more opportunities out there than people visualize or kind of see at the moment. A lot of it is just because they're in the US, the statistic that was out yesterday that was published was about 35% of all of the population of the US has been traumatized in some way or another because of the COVID-19 challenge. So we have a major, major challenge getting those people back into the right mindset and going. So lots of interesting opportunities, I think.
Thank you so much, Dolan. Leon?
Yeah, and I would like to add what Dolan said, because I just observed very interesting fact. Having the same industry, like monitoring of patients, what Livongo is doing there, my company is doing the similar stuff. And what I found that this crisis just sharpens the business with better value proposition. So it's like on the same street you have two shops, and there is a crisis. Why one shop is flowering during the crisis and another is closed? Same shops sell the same things on the same industry. So this is what happens today. If you are not ready for the value proposition, if you are not ready with processes, if you are not ready with people, you will lose great opportunity to piggyback on trends that this crisis created for us.
Thank you, Leon. Amos, what would you add?
I think what I would add is that it sort of tags off of what Dolan said around, going from a 1, 3, 5-year plan to being really agile. I think there's a bit of two things that need to go on in parallel. So I agree with that sentiment. And I also think that the businesses that are going to be most successful, they need to step back and realize that we are in an unprecedented time, that even if you've been through a crisis before, we really don't know what this is going to look like. We're more a global economy than we've ever been before. And so my thought process here is, first and foremost, actually do create a 2 to 3 year plan where you say, how do I operate on the assumption I'm going to get no additional outside capital, and my ability to get new customers may be extremely limited. And now I'm not suggesting that this is gloom and doom. I don't think that way at all. But how do you build a model where you can have the confidence that you can figure out how to build the strongest business that you can without any outside influence, other than do you provide value to a customer, and how do you do that at all, much less at scale? And then taking the same concept of being agile and learning on a constant basis, literally week to week, month to month, what's working, what's not, because to me, that's where the innovation of business model comes from. That's where the innovation of product set and who you should be targeting comes out of.
Thank you so much, Amos. And Joran?
Well, I'm in a sector that is being hit extremely hard. We see 80 to 90% fall in usage. So that means that it's not easy to predict what will happen. On the other hand, I do see a lot of things happening where people actually anticipate what will happen in 2021 and start investing and start looking at new and better solutions. We see I see a burst of new initiatives looking, for example, at social distancing at events. How do you do that from a technical perspective? It's not easy. And other people are jumping at that opportunity to make something happen in a difficult situation. So I think, within the sector, it's really dark, but there is some opportunity, and you see changes. I think there are two aspects that I think are worrying. One is that the way helicopter money is being used in the economy today seems to benefit large, inefficient companies against the real economy. So the benefit of being large seems to be amplified by the way governments are supporting business. And the disadvantage of being smaller is again being amplified by the way governments are supporting or not supporting business. I think that's the first really area of concern. And I think the second one is that I think from a general perspective, we have a very flawed concept of efficiency in our economy, where efficiency is defined as a financial concept, which we now see is not efficient at all because it has no slack and it cannot take a hit. If we would have had a real economy that was properly organized instead of around financialization and financial efficiency, we would have been much better equipped to deal with this problem. And I think that's a structural problem. I don't think that will disappear. I don't think this crisis will change that, or is unlikely to change that because the interests are too high. But I think the financialization of our economy after 2008 and now this crisis is reaching a point where it becomes a huge burden on actually people doing things. And I don't really have a solution to that, but I think it's definitely going to slow down the recovery, and it's going to slow down how we're going to get out of this.
Thank you, Joran. And Dan?
Yeah, so I think that there are many interesting topics that were brought with all the participants. I think that COVID-19 is obviously has a destructive element, but also a disruptive element. And, as entrepreneurs, we like the word disruptive. Disruptive means, to many of us, opportunities. We are here at Enviropower part of the energy world, quite stable. For sure is impacted and will be impacted. The trick is to guess how and how to use it. And I completely agree with Leon that, when you live in this extra disruptive time, there's opportunity if you can sharpen the tools, if you see how to make lemonade out of lemons, and there are many lemons out there. We'll talk about it, I guess, more in length, but here at Enviropower, we did change the course. Not so much maybe the course itself, but maybe emphasize other elements that we believe are in line with that trend. And I kind of touch on that very briefly. I'll touch again and then expand later on. But let's just think about what Leon said before we started, that he didn't like his team working from home, and now he was forced into that experiment. And Leon, I don't know if you like it or not, but you at least allow that. That's a major change in the way people work. And wherever people are, it means that they consume energy, which means that the energy that we are going to consume is going to have a different pattern, because we used to consume that energy when we are in the main office. And now all of us are consuming that energy, or actually more, because offices are more efficient than homes, at our homes. So the distribution of that energy, and I mean electricity, has changed. And us, as being in the electric world, in the power world, in the world of production of energy, has to adjust as well. We are lucky that our current plans or original plans are in line with that. So we just needed to emphasize how and what we are doing is in line with that change that is anticipated in the world of energy.
Yeah. Then I love working from home. And I would like to share a very interesting observation. It's not I love it because I like it. I love it because I like it, and it's justified by economically justified. Because before to meet, for example, with you, I would say, I jump to the airplane, 15 hours, just fly to United States, meet you in cafe. I spend a lot of money, a lot of time, and actually I spent a lot of years just flying around the world and meeting different people, and average success rate 5-7%. So more than 90%, I just lost money. I was lucky to meet incredible people. I like it. I learn a lot, but success rate for the company was very low. Now I meet much more people because I can meet more people at the same time. Success rate, I consider about 15-20% now. It just started, but I have 3-4 months to calculate this. 15-20%. Money and time just dramatically decreased. So I don't spend money at all and just spend my time. But when I spend my time talking not with one guy, with 10 guys at the same time, I also win 10 times in my time. So actually, it's economically justified. Some people like it if they could overcome themselves and find the good habits working from home. And this is very interesting observation that will impact our business models and will impact our social communication after COVID.
And
think about, if I may just respond to that. So think about a company like Google, right? I'm not talking about EnviroPower. We are 8 people strong. Google, hundreds of engineers, dozens of engineers working in teams that collaborate with each other. Before, they were actually under the wing of a large building with all the kit and caboodle of building management, making sure that the lights never goes off. Now we are talking about hundreds of engineers collaborating in California, a place that just recently, last summer, suffered from 2 weeks of outage. Imagine that those people working from home now don't have electricity for a week. Imagine the losses to Google not being able now to actually sustain work because they are dependent on the electricity going to their home, that we know that no matter what we do, will always be weaker than the electricity going to a main building. Now, think about the changes that would trigger. In our small world here on EnviroPower, we're talking about backup power-wise, to your home. So you never use the electricity. Because if it was important before COVID-19 to have a backup power at your home, definitely in California, definitely in the East Coast where you have major storms and you can lose electricity easily for 2, 3, 4, 5 days. Now, when you lose electricity, it's not about being comfortable or not, or being safe or not. It's about your capacity to make living. And when talking about company like Google's, it's the capacity to sustain business.
Thank you. Joran, do you have a comment?
I would like to say something on this, gentleman, Nadia, if you allow me. I don't know if you can hear me well, because I'm sitting in one of the largest European intercontinental airports here in Rome, and I would have liked to show you what it looks like, but my video doesn't work from here. But the airport is operating at 5% capacity, and it's pretty spectral to see such a gigantic structure capable of hosting 50+ million passengers on any given year, operating at 5% capacity. And I think that we are in a situation which is already the world after the crisis. I mean, it's a new world, even if, of course, the new configuration hasn't been completed yet, and it's far from being completed, but this is already a sort of a new reality. What I can understand from the comments of our gracious host guests here today is already that we are seeing the shaping of certain features in the minds of the entrepreneurs. Of course, there are the ones who are seeing that there are a number of opportunities to seize, and they are excited. There are other entrepreneurs that are disillusioned and quite I would say frustrated at seeing how the situation, even at governmental level and backing level for small businesses, is not really advancing as quickly as it's been promised by the government or as it should advance. And on the other end, I think this is a great time to get rid of our bells and whistles, if our companies had any of those, and really let's say reconfigure our businesses in I would say in a very efficient manner, which doesn't only include going more digital and adopting more technology, but really I think it's a overall reshaping of the way business models are thought of. And I also see another trend that some of you correctly pointed out, and we had occasion on this panel to address it a couple of times already. It's a power generation issue. We're taking for granted that we have electricity available for our activities, and that we just simply shift from working in offices to work at home. But again, this is all predicated on having access to reliable sources of power generation. Otherwise, even this beautiful virtual conference couldn't be made possible. So I would like to turn over to the panel and ask this question: what do you see as young dynamic companies as an opportunity to align yourself with power generators, utility companies in terms of technology, so that you can better their game and possibly make money at it while doing so? I don't know if Donald, you want to start on this?
Yeah, thanks, Giampaolo. So it's interesting you mentioned that. So I think that, so obviously we've all kind of talked a little bit about kind of I'll use an overused word. I'll use the word paradigm. So there's been a lot of shifts in the paradigm on how we work, and we do take it for granted. We are surprised, not when we hit the light switch, but we're surprised and the light comes on. We are surprised when we hit the light switch and light does not come on. That's when we're surprised. And Dan, to your point, being in California, I'm blessed. I live down by the beach, so we have, it's cooler weather for us. So there's less air conditioning, less things going on. So our part of the grid is not as impacted. We did sustain rolling kind of brownouts, is what we called them here. I'm not quite sure why we use that term, but because I don't know that, but there's still blackouts. I mean, they turn your freaking power off for 2 hours. So from my perspective, I do think it's important that entrepreneurs and small businesses and just kind of business in general find creative ways to align themselves with components that are going to reduce their risk. We're in this place in our now, as we kind of come back out of this, where I talk about this to a lot of clients, where there's a component in every contract called force majeure that talks about acts of God, man, and war, that something could go wrong. And generally when that component of any agreement is talked about, it's skipped over, because nothing that bad, unless you're in California and we have an earthquake and we slip off into the ocean and Arizona becomes the new West Coast, nothing can possibly be that bad. But we experienced something that bad coming into the coronavirus and into COVID-19. So I do think it's important that we encourage those that we support, and we encourage our businesses to be much more stable, to take into account the fact that in these cases where we do have people now working from home in a mixed environment, brick and mortar environment, and from home, that we do need to provide stability so that we can continue to work. What that looks like, whether it is to Dan's point, whether it's recovery, and I don't apologize, Dan, I'm not that technically up on what you guys do, but to recover and to be able to generate electricity at home. And where I live, I have solar, although it feeds right back into the grid. I can't leverage it if the grid goes down. So I do think that's a very, very important topic for us. I also think that's one of the things that we'll see from an investor's perspective where organizations will be focusing, investor organizations will be focusing much more heavily on that aspect for kind of future state business. So it's an interesting question, Giampaolo.
Thank you. Over to Leon.
Yeah, thank you for these questions. My approach is very simple. If business could answer the question, not raise the questions, provide solution and answer the questions, this business will survive. And it's very important to understand the weight of these questions. So if it's all the time I just dig or make research in Google, what questions people just ask. And if you have some critical value and critical weight of questions, it means there is a problem. So if your business answer this problem, answer these questions, so people like answers, people do not like questions, they like answers. So if you deliver a real and clear answer to this problem, it doesn't matter crisis, not crisis, this business will work. But I would like to add very interesting example here. There is a great, incredible entrepreneur, Dan Locke. Maybe you know, he makes some webinars about sales, how to make sales. He wrote 13 books. I read all of them. I read all of them. So, and he's so amazing and creative. He understood how to piggyback on this crisis. He took his last book, and for the 1 month, he wrote 2 more chapters in the book who was sold very nice already a year ago, or a couple of years ago. And now he sell again the same plus these 2 chapters about how to make business during COVID-19 and make more money from the same with little addition. That's amazing. That's amazing type or example of how to make business, how to piggyback on crisis, and how to jump on the trend.
Thank you. Who would like to comment?
I would like to jump into this conversation with some meta level, and I will bring another video conference for a summit that I was participating on 2 weeks ago that included a high-level person from Schneider, a company that obviously invests a lot in the energy world, in the smart home management system, and so forth. They exist in everyone's home, probably. It's not something interesting because they are very interested in what's called grid modernization, smart home resiliency, and so forth. And he said, I would love to invest in those elements, but my concern with the economic crisis that followed the COVID-19, that what's called non-discretionary products will suffer. So non-discretion in the sense that if you don't really have to have them, if you keep your life without these $10,000, $20,000 that will come out of your pocket, you just won't. And not so much because you don't have this $10,000, just because it's unclear, the future is unclear. So I think that when it comes to crisis that impact pretty much everyone, there could be also a major distinction from the preference of investors, and like to get the feedback from the investors on this call, as well as the startup or the innovators themselves, about discretionary and non-discretionary products that are really the nice to have, that we spend money on just because we like to, and those products that are so core that with or without a crisis, we need them and we spend the money on them. So I just wonder if you see also the distinction between discretionary and non-discretionary.
Thank you, Dan. And Joran, you also had a comment?
Yeah, I think one of the key points there is, is the role of government. I was making a comment about government earlier. I'm not per se anti-government, quite the opposite. I think without government, the financial sector would have died of its incompetence 12 years ago, and without government, our society would crumble now, because they are keeping things afloat at the moment. But the problem is that government often allows vested interests to block innovation of this kind. And when I talk about vested interests, I'm talking specifically about private monopolies, whether they arise through intellectual property or through market platform dominance, which we have in tech, or other aspects, which is that when you have something that is potentially a problem solver, like private generation of electricity, the issue of how the grid is managed comes to the fore. Sorry, somebody at the door. So the issue of how the grid is managed comes to the fore. And that problem is badly managed as a general topic of discussion, because if you don't solve that problem, which is typically through the breakup of private monopolies, then bringing the solution to people who actually need it is going to be much, much more difficult. I mean, we know electric cars were realistic 15 years ago, and they were blocked by private monopolies and cartels. So private generation of energy is eminently possible. You know, anybody who reads science fiction knows that the problems of an advanced technological society are not lack of energy, but too much of energy, which is exactly what we're doing as we're capturing more energy that is distributed by the sun. So the problem here is not what investors can do or what innovators can do. The problem is, how do you define a level playing field, and how do you make sure that opportunities that are there can be used without being stopped by people who occupy the space and have every interest in stopping innovation from coming to the market. And that's not government, that's private monopolies.
A very good example, for example, about Apple. Apple just blocked Pixar and then bought Pixar.
Well, by the way, I think that from the energy board, what Joran just mentioned, it's really what's happening. Obviously, the energy board is heavily regulated. We are blessed in many ways here in the US to have a major deregulation to the energy sector, which allow a lot of innovation to flow into that sector. Yet on the other end, and I agree with Jaron that there are still private entities that do block that, and it's all about the interpretation of the law, right? I mean, some areas and some more friendly incumbent, you actually get much better results and easier way to maneuver. In some other areas, you know, so interestingly, to block innovation and block advancement that you don't want even to go there. So I think it's at the end of the day, kind of a mix of the regulators, meaning government, and the incumbents that are there to interpret the law. And obviously, you have to be smart. Obviously, startups cannot be always everywhere. You have to pick and choose your battles, and that's definitely one element to be smart on. Where to fight your battles. You know, you need to find the environment that is friendly.
Right. I'm going to jump in with the perspective, with a different perspective, which is the perspective of the entrepreneur. And so I am not experienced enough to speak about it from the energy perspective and from the big company perspective at all. But what I've seen over the course of the last 25 years, and what I believe is what you will see if you don't have the kind of internet you need at home, if you don't have the kind of energy you need at home, if you're getting hours or days or maybe weeks of lack of, access to lights or whatever, you'll start to see these same people figure out how to innovate, right? And it's really hard to say what that innovation is going to be. But if you're lacking power and you need power, you're going to see people get really creative with, how do I have enough to do something? And out of that, we'll see some amazing innovation. Same with internet. I dealt with it for one single day, which was my internet went down for one day in the last 2 months. And I was the first part of the day, I was like, oh my gosh, what do I do? I can't get anything done. And then suddenly I realized, no, I cannot get a lot of stuff done that I didn't need to get done anyway. But I can focus on the things that were most important right now and prepare myself for whatever, which is one really bad example, because I've got great internet and great power where I am. We don't deal with rolling blackouts. That's not a challenge that we have. But I'm actually I would say longer term, I'm more encouraged by the stress this will put on the system, because I think we'll see some amazing innovation come out of it.
Thank you. And Giampaolo, you wanted to add something?
Absolutely. I think also this last comment is really spot on, right on the money, because I think it depends entirely on us if we want to leave our own movie, the movie of our own companies, or we want to leave a movie that has been passed on to us by the situation and by the media, and I would say also by a certain Latin general state of depression. And I think, this is really the best example that you've just supplied to all of us to remind us that actually opportunity is well within our reach. And it would apply also to the bureaucracy that is stifling innovation. And I think, it's the constituency's fault if bureaucracy, lingers as it is, because, we've been sitting with this leaking pipe for way too long because we didn't think it was essential. I just wrote an article a few weeks ago that I would invite everyone to read. I calculated the carbon footprint of the bureaucracy. And when you take a look at the huge amount of losses that we compound in every single country in the world, and it's incredible on any given year. I also would like to add an aspect that I think it's important that we can also learn from just about everyone. China, for example, to most of the people who are not Chinese, is often seen as a very rigid country. But for example, in Chinese contracts, I've been doing business with China 25 years. In the Chinese contracts, there is a clause that is not the clause of force majeure. A force majeure is a very rigid clause because it's just, triggered by an act of God, as we say, but when it's triggered, it can destroy the contract. It can terminate the business relationship, sometimes at a loss for both parties. The Chinese have been somewhat smarter. They have included a clause which is, and I loosely translate it, it's a clause of change of conditions, and whereby when they perceive that there is something like force majeure, the parties are free to redress and readdress the contract and to change it considerably as to adapt it to the new situation. I think, wherever we turn and our gaze, we can catch something that we can learn from and implement in our own daily actions and marketing and strategies and execution of whatever it is that we're doing. And I'd be happy to hear your opinion on that. Back to you.
If I may?
Yes, sure.
I would like to reply a little bit to that by saying that I think this crisis gives us the opportunity to leave old ways of thinking behind. And I think one of those old ways of thinking is that bureaucracy or government is an inhibitor to innovation. It's simply not correct. When you read Maria Mazzucato's book on the entrepreneurial state, it's quite clear that all the tech giants have really been dependent on US government money in order even to exist, let alone grow. So the idea that innovation comes from the necessity of small innovators being confronted with actual problems is partly true, but only partly. And if you leave out the big innovations that actually come from government money, then I don't think you will make big steps. And I think you need to have a combination, a smart combination of both. And thinking in the old dogmas of government bad, private good, it's not going to cut it anymore, because what we see today is that those old dogmas got us into the position where we are today, where we have no slack, where we have no efficiency issues in order to deal with this crisis. I mean, the US is going to unemployment of 25, 30%. That's outrageous, because there is no slack in the system, because it has to be financially efficient, which means it's operationally wholly inadequate. And that whole thinking of government bad, stopping innovation, bureaucracy bad, is the old dogmas that got us into this mess in the first place. So I think we need to rid ourselves of those. That's 20th century thinking. Really, Ronald Reagan has been dead for a long time.
Thank you. Who would like to comment as well? Dolan?
It's an interesting comment, Jorn. So I think there's a couple of things. So the here in the U.S. we had the payroll protection plan. I think we're all probably familiar with the tenets behind that and kind of how that worked. It's a relatively old topic, but so we had PPP that was provided to some that would, supposedly help the help businesses keep afloat, and it did well for some businesses. So I see some in right or wrong whether it was executed well or not, but the fact that it occurred is interesting. But I think one of the things that, and I think Amos, you kind of led to this kind of thinking. You're in an earlier comment. I'm hearing kind of a common thread, and Leon, same thing, talking about Dan Locke. I know Dan and his team, and those guys they do amazing stuff. The thing that people need to keep in mind in business, regardless of the government, is that no one is coming to save you except yourself.
Amos?
So what the government does for you, sorry, Nadia, I took a pregnant pause there to had that brain bubble pop. But as a business owner, or as an entrepreneur, as a leader in a team, you have to have that mindset that you save you. Governments don't save you. Governments can contribute, they can help, they can do those things, but you have to save you, and you've got to be creative, and you've got to have that mindset set. That's critically important. And a lot of people, unfortunately, lose that mindset. And that's where, to your point earlier, Leon, where you see two companies doing exactly the same thing, one here and one here, and one fails and one thrives.
And you know, Donald, actually, I will connect what you said to what Leon and Amos said before. I think that the idea of creativity in business is, I think that Leon said it in his words, is about identifying the opportunity, identifying the need. And I think that was what Amos thought about. So from my narrow perspective about energy, I want to share with you a fascinating conversation I had with high-level executive at Siemens Energy out of their Houston office. Obviously an empty office today, hundreds of employees, but they're going through stage 2 of reopening. So now it's okay to come to the office. They run a survey among those hundreds of employees that before COVID-19, spend probably an hour on the Houston rings going to the office or more. 80% of the employees that can now go back to their office almost normally said they prefer to stay at home. Now, is this a crisis or opportunity? Depends on the interpretation. Siemens actually is taking now a whole new look at that. Why do we really need such a huge office, several floors downtown Houston, where probably pay top dollars? Wouldn't it be more effective actually to move into satellite offices based on the geography disparity of our employees around the Houston area? Have a very small, much smaller offices geared towards meetings rather than working, having those hundreds of employees saving probably 2 to 3 hours on the road. Everyone is happy. You can still meet as you want, and everyone saves money. That's innovation by understanding the need. And if Siemens goes like that, and their employees feel happier, safer, more contributing more to the company, there will be a winner. And company that keep insisting that pour everyone down to downtown Manhattan or downtown Houston may be the loser of the new world post COVID-19.
Yeah, that is very interesting point, Dan, because it will create totally new culture. Company, the basic of the company, fundamental company success is based on the company culture, and this fundamentally change company culture. So it should be grown new culture, and it's not clear yet how it works, because before I knew some companies, and my friends run some companies with 200 people, even without office. They're working from cafe, from home, over the world.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't about culture, it was about the same goal that we have to implement. So all around goal, not around culture. Yeah. And if we are working in office, it's together, culture, goal, all these social shaking, something like this. So this is very, very fundamental question, how to create culture that will drive company to success if people working from home. This is interesting.
Yeah, I'll jump in there because I think it parlays off of what you're all saying. There's way more than two types of leaders in the world, but I think that the thing that I'm seeing now is that leaders are kind of falling into one of two buckets. They're either visionary leaders or they're leaders because they're in charge. And the leaders, because they're in charge, are saying, okay, what's happening around me and how do I go with that to create the best potential scenario? And the visionary leaders are saying, what do I believe the future is going to look like? I might not really know, but I'm trying to paint a picture and then I'm trying to create that path there. And I think those are the people that, at least from an investor perspective, we're looking out for. I'm looking out for to say, where can we create the future, because they're looking for the opportunity. They're actually seeing they're creating that mental picture in their mind and getting there, versus saying, I'm going to listen to everyone else around me and figure out what that path is based on what's actually happening in real time, which may lead you in the complete wrong direction.
It's interesting you say that, Amos, because I think there's spending a lot of co-hosting a mastermind, and we focus specifically on leadership, and it's very fascinating because there really is that kind of dual tier required in leadership: those who are forward thinking, and then those leaders, those individuals. Like as a CEO, it's kind of a Clint Eastwood moment where, one of Clint Eastwood's favorite lines is, a man's got to know his limitations, right? So you work with people who surround you and help fill those gaps so you can make the best possible decisions in this moment as we go forward and iterate quickly and fail fast, and fail cheaply, by the way, but fail fast. But it's interesting because there are still those leaders that have to be there to lead from a kind of that command and control point where they're actually helping people be measured, get things, Leon mentioned it earlier, still get things done, even though they're working from home. And there's kind of that push and pull between those two kind of roles inside of any organization: those who lead forward strategically, and those who are then entrusted with the ability to go lead the team to go take the hill. I think one of the biggest things that I've seen happen in organizations that have thrived is there's just a phenomenal amount of transparency. The goal, the company culture and the mantra and the charter and all that stuff still gets read, and you still see all those kinds of things. But the transparency from that leader that says, we're just trying to figure this stuff out as we're going along. We may be good, it may be bad, but we're going this way, and this is what we're doing, and you're a part of it.
I totally agree with that. I think it's a very interesting development where you see how, from an organizational point of view, I mean, in our organization, we've been working remotely for 5 years now. And so this is kind of like not the new normal. This is like the way old normal.
Sure.
But I see how other people are struggling with it. And I find it interesting because obviously the concept of trust emerges in a very different context. And you have to let people decide themselves how they're going to do their work and how they're going to communicate about how they do it. And then it turns out that empowering people to self-organize around how they do their stuff is often much more efficient than the old top-down approach where you say, I need you to be there at this place from 9 to 5, and then I need you to do this by, allowing people to have, one of the tools that we use is Trello, where you have little boards that you can say, this is what I'm working on, or that. And it's amazing how it creates that transparency, because you have your daily or weekly meeting online and you just know what's going on, and you really don't need to see people all the time in order to do that. I mean, I am an investor, but not in real estate. And I'm very happy I'm not an investor in real estate, because I would dump business real estate as fast as my legs could carry me. Because I think it's one sector that will suffer long-term badly, which, on a more general level may well be a good thing.
Yeah. It depends where, right? I mean, maybe a large office in New York, Manhattan will suffer, but now people flowing out of Manhattan to the suburbs, and if you had a real estate in the suburb, you may be very happy. On the other end, I do want to relate to both what Amos and Don said, and I think that Amos, when you talked about the two type of leaders, and also you, Don, it's the difference between the leader with the vision and the one that flows with the current. And when you said vision, you mean strategy. And I think that all of us here that lead startups need to have a strategy. And what it means that it's actually not only what you decide to go on, and what you decide to give up. what you do not pursue? And that's the toughest question. While making the commitment to a path, you bet that this path will help you to change the world, because what's the point? Otherwise, just go and work for Siemens, Schneider, and so forth. They already changed the world. If you want to change the world beyond them, that requires a strategy and high sense of commitment. And we always talk about the commitment because it's tough. It's a new path that you pave. I just want to share with you a little bit about EnviroPower, because we came to talk about so much about energy in this call. And I'll tell you how we started. So we belong to a sector that is called micro CHP. It's this novel idea about, in one device to produce electricity and heat. It's very, very efficient, very economic. People love that, but it's a failing industry. Potentially everyone should have it, but it's a failing industry. And we took a very interesting approach and high commitment for that 7 years ago. We basically asked, let me ask you that question. Do you know how many heating system we have in the US? Around 120 million. You know why? Because there are around 120 million homes and buildings in the US, which means every home needs to have a heating system, which means that it's a non-discretionary product. If it fails, you replace it the next day or the same day. Otherwise, you freeze up your home, or if you're California, you don't have hot showers the next morning. Now, what we did is very, very strange when you live in these industries that are called micro CHP. We took boilers 7 years ago. We literally cut them by half. Boilers are non-discretionary products. And we ask a simple question: how we can integrate into this boiler geometry a small generator with two conditions, without increasing its price, without changing its functionality. Because we wanted to ride on that idea of non-discretionary product that is distributed generation at your home. And that commitment start paying off, because when you have a product that people are buying anyway, whether the economy is up or down, and in the US there are 4 million people that change their boilers every year because they have to, not because they want to. And in Europe there's 4.5 to 5 million people who are doing the same. That means, and you're a boiler manufacturer, that means that you're almost recession proof. That means that as a startup that sells those products, you can align with big brothers, those who have done manufacturing of boilers for 100 years or third or fourth generation. And my point is that when you have a strategy, when you see the opportunity in the market and you form a strategy, yes, maybe we gave up hundreds of other opportunities, but the fact that we stay on the course and we are still not completely successful, we raise money, we are on the way to provide a product to the market, but the fact that we stay on course with a clear strategy, or with all the flexibility that came with that, allow us actually to start becoming somewhat disruptive and somewhat get the ears of those who have done boilers and micro CHP for the last 40 years in a different way than ours.
Thank you very much, Dan. So we are approaching the final round of questions, and I have a brief question to all of you. So if you could summarize a key message for our audiences, both serial entrepreneurs and investors, what would be the key message for you so that they could survive and succeed in the current environment with this new normal, which we discussed today? So what would be your advice, Dolan?
I'll keep it very, very brief. Two things. The first is I would tell people, it's a phrase that I heard the other day, and I really, really like this phrase: become an idea farmer. Really focus on new ideas, and everybody go get a 5-year-old. I suggest it, because a 5-year-old will ask you why everything is the way it is, for any possible thing. So think like a 5-year-old and ask yourself why. Why are we providing this service? Who do we provide it to? What's the value? Ask why. So if you don't have a 5-year-old, I've got a young grandson I can hook you up with. You can have a conversation with. So I would do those two things. I would be an idea farmer. Think of new things. Re-envision. Imagination is critically important right now. So reimagine your business. And that's it. Thank you. Thanks for letting me hear.
Thank you, Dolan. And Amos?
Pleasure.
I'm going to say something very different than Dolan, but I also love everything he said. I agree completely. My advice specifically for the entrepreneur is be really critical of looking at your business. It's the same thing I said, I think, in my first comment, which is how do you view your business as if you will raise no outside capital for at least 2 years, and how can you make yourself economically stable in that time? And be really critical with the way that you look at everything, and just focus on the things that work and build a strong business. All of the innovation will come out of that if you're willing to put that effort in.
Thank you, Amos. And Joran?
I agree with Amos. I mean, we're a bootstrap business. We have no outside capital, so that's a case exactly as you described. I think the fundamentals don't change for entrepreneurs like ourselves. You still need a problem solution fit, you still need a product market fit, and then you need to scale. In a period of change like we have today, interesting times, the old Chinese curse, the problems change. So don't look at your old solutions to changing problems. Re-engage with the problems and try to re-engage with solutions, and then try to adapt your products and see if there's a market. That hasn't changed. That methodology hasn't changed. The environment is changing, but the methodologies are still the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Joran. And Dan?
Yeah, I agree with Joran. I think Joran said the key word here, adaptation. But that's nothing different. I mean, with crisis or without crisis, startup need to adapt. Everyone needs to adapt. Environment change sometimes slower, sometimes faster. But I would like actually to end with also a quote from a movie. I like your quote as well. I'm actually using myself, which was a surprise that you brought it up, Don. I like another quote, but I think that is highly relevant to startup. And my advice is from this great American movie, American Sniper: aim small, miss small, because you need to have the grand plan, but the implementation on the day-to-day, week by week, aim small, miss small means you will fail fast, but on small increments if you fail, and succeed on small increments as well, because you will have then the flexibility to move around, the changing reality.
Thank you. And Leon?
Just very simple. Have fun from new normal, and have fun from what you're doing, and you will succeed.
Yeah, Giampaolo?
Yes, great advice today from all of you, and thank you so much. I would have just one tip for the day, and reconnects to what I just said before, and strive to star in the movie of your company, of your business, rather than having a little part as a super in the movie that the media try to sell you. Just concentrate on what you're doing, because you know what you have to do, and don't pay too much attention to what goes around in terms of media hype. Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody. We had a great discussion today, and we encourage you to participate in our Startup Leaders Clubs every week. We have it several times, and we also have our roadshows, masterclasses, and keynotes, which you can also use for your audiences and our audiences of entrepreneurs, serial entrepreneurs, and investors. And in a couple of minutes, so we'll start preparing for the new keynote address of Gayatri Sarkar, devoted to the growth strategy for product development in the era of COVID-19. We wish Giampaolo a nice flight. So he is getting back to his flight mode as he used to, and I think as we all used to. So we are getting out of the lockdown gradually, and stay healthy. And thank you so much for your kind advice to our audiences. And please join us and generate new formats of interaction